You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. Really cool announcement at the end of this show, so stick around to the end because I got something really cool for you at the very end. But first, I'm your host, your pal in the Katie copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. You can find the show on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. Today's a mailbag episode. I'm taking your questions. Usually we would have done this on Tuesday, but you know, there was some stuff going on, so roster cuts to cover. So we did that instead, so we're doing the mailbag a little late this week. We'll be back on the usual schedule next week with Twitter Tuesday and also bold predictions on Friday. So if you listen to the Friday show next week, if you want to get your bold predictions in, go ahead and do that on Twitter or in the Google Doc or whatever you want. So before I get into the mailbag today, I want to talk to you about the Ultimate Season Preview from August 30th, which was Monday, so you're a week behind now, all the way through September 8th, the day before the season opener. We're going to do kind of one division a day of the Ultimate Season Previews. That means all four Locked On hosts for the teams of that division. So, you know, Locked On Vikings, Packers, Bears, Lions, for example, as well as Ross Tucker and Jason Lockenfora with our Odyssey partners are breaking down each division and going in depth like you've never seen before. Go check that out. It is a separate podcast feed. It's not on Locked On NFL or whatever. It's a separate podcast feed, the Ultimate 2021 NFL Season Preview. Search that wherever you find your favorite podcasts, Odyssey, whatever, and you can find it there. Go check that out. It's a really awesome project. But now we're going to do the mailbag. And before we get into the mailbag, real quick, there was a punter thing. So the punter saga has been a bit of a story this week with Britton Colquitt getting cut and re-signed and now cut again for Jordan Berry. And now Jordan Berry is the punter. So I don't know what they were doing with their punting situation or what the whole deal was, but now Jordan Berry, longtime punter for the Steelers, he lost a job in camp this year, and now he's coming in to be the punter for the Vikings. Now, I don't know a lot about Jordan Berry. It seems like he was an average punter, a fine punter, and we'll see if he can hold kicks as well. But Britton Colquitt is now out as the Vikings punter. So that's certainly interesting. There are a couple of other facets of this that will actually be handled by mailbag questions. So we'll get into that. And let's just pop right into the mailbag then. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to catch up on the Google Doc. If you ever have a question for Locked On Vikings or a bold prediction for a particular game, go ahead and check out the Google Doc in the show notes. You can get it to me there. And I have been really bad about looking at it all month, so I've got some from over the month. The ones that are still relevant, I guess, I came to answer here. So we're going to start there. Chad the Lesser says, so I've watched a bunch of videos breaking down Justin Jefferson's release package, and they're all great, Brett Coleman especially, but I went back to his college tape, highlights, not coach's tape, and I'm not seeing the skip step or karaoke step that is so much a part of how he gets into his routes in the pros, like almost never. I was mostly looking at 19, so maybe it was because of the slot work, or did he pick it up in the meantime? So my guess, I'm not going to go and watch LSU Justin Jefferson tape, but my guess would be that you're probably onto something. You know, you would see that in his highlights if he was good at it, right? So I think looking at, I mean, obviously you should like go watch all the real tape if you really want to do it. But if all you have is highlights, I think that's fine. And the fact that you didn't see that is still kind of interesting. I don't think it's beyond the pale at all that he just picked it up in the pros. Maybe he picked it up from Adam Thielen, who loves that move, or he picked it up from, you know, whoever his wide receivers coach was. I believe it was Andrew Janocko last year was the wide receivers coach. So now he's the quarterbacks coach and kind of maybe the next Kevin Stefanski. So maybe something like that. But yeah, I don't think it's beyond the pale. I think that's an interesting insight. Maybe you caught something that Justin Jefferson learned in his time as a Viking. That's always cool to see. Moving on to the next one. It comes from George, who says, injuries aside, why does this team love to move their linemen out of their natural position? Like, when did all this start? And did they have success in the beginning? I know I'm not the only one that gets annoyed every time some lineman is playing something they've never played in the past. So I super get annoyed at this too. So I disagree with it. But I can steelman the Vikings' take on this. So the Vikings move guys around like this because they want the best 5 players on the field. So imagine you had 4 good tackles and one center. And really, really bad guards. Drew Samia and Dakota Dozier as guards and 4 good tackles. So you can have a really deep tackle room and crappy guards, or you can move those tackles to guards. They take a slight decrease in quality, but probably better than Dakota Dozier still. You can even have a competition at that. And then you probably still have a better offensive line. That's the logic, and that's exactly what happened here in 2021. I don't really agree with it. I mean, just go get a guard, right? Like, why don't you just not have a Dakota Dozier problem? Like, that seems fine. But that's where I fall on it. But that's their whole thing, is whoever the best 5 are, find a way to get the best 5 on the field. And they value position versatility a lot so that they have the flexibility to make those kinds of calls. But I think they chase it a little too much, so I'm not as big of a fan. Next one comes from, the next one is from Dr. Hans. So Dr. Hans did a whole thing. I actually tweeted it out, and I'll link that tweet in the show notes. It's definitely outdated now, but basically this really cool guess about what procedure Christian Darrisaw did. And the only reason I'm shouting is out because I just want to shout out Dr. Hans. I think that was a really cool guess, and I like the effort you put into it. And I'm sorry I didn't see it in time to put it in a different mailbag. But basically it was this guess that he had this procedure, and that's actually a 12-week recovery, and he's not going to be there. And because Christian Darrisaw didn't go on IR, obviously that's outdated. But I just wanted to shout out Dr. Hans for a really good guess. So the next one comes from George, who asks, when Mond is out there, is the conservative play more of a testament to Mond's slow processing or the lackluster play of the second and third offensive line? I do think the offensive line has a lot to do with this. And I think Mond overreacts to pressure. He either scrambles or checks down way too fast. That was one of the critiques I had from him in the preseason. And I think part of that, it's not necessarily slow processing, but just, if you're not as comfortable with what you're looking at out there, you're a little more willing to kind of bail on the whole thing and just go for the check down or go for the scramble and kind of nuke the play. So I think that's partially, you didn't get great blocking from like Zach Bailey. But part of it is also, I think Mond's response to that is a little, I've used the word skittish in the past, and I think that's kind of like what I'm talking about. Next up comes from Marco, who says, with Darrisaw having missed the entire preseason, how long do you think it will take for him to take Hill's starting spot? Do you think Hill might hold on to it all year? It's super possible for Rashad Hill to hold on to this all year. It depends on how well Rashad Hill plays. If Rashad Hill is good, then Rashad Hill will keep the job. And if he never plays poorly enough to get benched, he won't get benched. There's only so much you can prove against second teamers, and Christian Darrisaw, now that we're in season, isn't going to get any opportunity against first teamers. You don't have time to do that. So it's kind of up to Rashad Hill. If he gets hurt, if he gets benched, Darrisaw gets in. So I think somebody else asked, what week does Darrisaw get in? The week Rashad Hill gets hurt, whenever that really is, or the week he gets benched, whenever that really is. And maybe you could go through the schedule and see what edge rusher is going to do that to him. I actually think Trey Hendrickson might be a really tough matchup for him. So maybe even week 1, but we'll see where that all ends up. Before we get any further into it, I want to talk to you about Built Bar. Built Bar is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, comes in 9 delicious flavors, all covered in 100% chocolate, chocolate mint, chocolate peanut butter, chocolate cherry, cookies and cream, all sorts of delicious stuff. They have their main 9, and they also have some other ones that show up on the website every once in a while. So make sure you go check those out at built.com is the website. Go to built.com and you can get a box for yourself. I recommend the sampler. It's 2 of each of their 9 main flavors, and they are delicious. But they're not candy bars. They're protein bars. And that means they're not going to knock you off the wagon. They're low sugar, low calorie, high fiber, high protein, low carb. They're even keto friendly if you're doing the keto thing. So head on over to built.com. You can enter promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15. You get 15% off of your order, whatever you get. That is promo code LOCKED15 at built.com. All right, moving on with this mailbag, we have some good caustic energy coming from Andy, who says, does this entire season's success once again hinge on being completely healthy? It seems like we have no depth. If the injury bug bites, are Zim and Spielman safe for another run it back? And is this 100% Kirk's last year on the team? This sounds like you really want it to be, buddy. It sounds like you are ready for the next chapter of the Vikings. So here's the thing. Yes, they have a depth issue, which means they are particularly vulnerable to injury. That's never a great thing to be. So yeah, injury luck is probably going to be more important to the Vikings than it is for other teams. But other than a few principal players, yeah, if you lose Kirk Cousins, yes, it's probably season over. That's probably true of most teams. If you lose Harrison Smith, you're in a lot of trouble. If you lose Danielle Hunter again, you're in a lot of trouble. There's a few players that kind of have to stay healthy, and that's never a great place to be. I don't think that's entirely true. I think, if you lose Eric Kendricks, I think you've got, if you, let's say you lose Nick Vigil, right? You got like 10 Nick Vigils. If you lose one of the tight ends now, you kind of lost Irv Smith. If you lose Tyler Conklin too, and now it's Chris Herndon, okay, that's fine. If you lose one of the offensive linemen, let's say Oli Udoh goes down, well, now it's Wyatt Davis, and we've kind of been excited about him. So there are parts where they're deep. There's parts where they're not, of course. I think Zim and Spielman are safer than fans want Zim and Spielman to be. I know we're like, it's 8 years of Zimmer now, and we're kind of ready for the next chapter. I get it. But I don't think the Wilfs are really into pursuing novelty. I think fans are. I think fans want the new exciting guy. The Wilfs don't. The Wilfs, I think, see what Zim and Spielman do. I think they're happy about it. And I think ultimately they'll look, if you go 1-8 to start the season, of course, we start having a conversation. But I don't think it's this thing where if they get in the wild card and exit, then it's going to be fire. A lot of people think, a wild card exit would mean fire everybody. I don't think the Vikings do, though. So the last one from the Google form, it comes from Muircat, who says, what's happening with the Brian O'Neill contract extension? I don't know. It's been reported that they have definitely been in talks. Brian wants to say the Vikings want to keep him, so it's just a matter of money. There's some interesting projections, 5 years, 70-something million contract, something like that. We'll see if the money can get worked out or not. Sometimes this kind of extension happens like mid-season too. The Vikings usually get it done during camp, and now that has passed, so it's later than usual for the Vikings, but it'll come. Moving on to the actual Twitter questions. The first one I am going to answer here on Twitter comes from Kirk's Vaccine Needle. Who says, it's Monday after the Vikings win at Cincinnati. I like your attitude. First 5 minutes of your podcast, what did we specifically do right to get that win? Okay, so I'm going to cover preview the Vikings-Cincinnati game a lot more in future days here. But the thing that I think is really interesting, I was just talking to Sands, who is a frequent guest on Locked On Bengals, and is also somebody I interact with a lot. And we were just talking about like the offensive line, defensive line matchups and how interesting they are. And, you have like Jonah Williams is their left tackle, and he has a problem with length. And the guy he's probably going up against most of the game is DJ Wanham, who is like, oops, all length. So it's an interesting matchup. And I think if that goes the way it sounds like it'll go, that might be a big factor. I think Kirk has to pull out of his funk from the preseason. Kirk's in a funk. He's got to pull out of it. I think we're talking about that happening. I think we're talking about the fronts working and slowing down the Bengals run game, which is very similar to our own run game. We have to kind of say the opposite doesn't happen with the Bengals front. I don't have a lot of belief in the Bengals front. So I think those are the kind of things that I would talk about. Gabrielle Greco asks a really interesting one. How much money are we wasting with all these cuts and re-signings? Feels like we used to analyze every penny, and now we just totally forgot about the financial part of these moves. So for the most part, there is not a financial component to these moves. Let's say you have a $2 million contract and $500,000 of that is a signing bonus. If you cut that guy, you recoup the other $1.5 million, say it wasn't guaranteed, and then the signing bonus would stay on the books. And then you re-sign that guy, and then you just re-sign that guy to $1.5 million contract without a signing bonus, and then it's basically the same cap charge, and he makes the same money and all that stuff. That, for all intents and purposes, I think that's what happened. Except for Britton Colquitt, they did accelerate some portion of his signing bonus. I think it's less than $1 million, accelerate onto this year's cap, but away from the 2022 cap, which at this point seems to be in a more dire place than the 2021 cap. So I guess they're doing that to cut Britton Colquitt, and then they bring on Jordan Berry. But that's a more normal move. All the cuts and re-signings and stuff, I believe they are re-signing to functionally the same deal that they were on. John says, I know that Irv was supposed to be a huge part of the offense, but is it reasonable to think that we could get 2020 Irv Conklin production out of Conklin and Herndon this year and expect to still be fine in that area? Here's the thing. I wouldn't call that fine. Kyle Rudolph was a blocker primarily for the last few years of his deal. And for somebody like Conklin and Herndon, who aren't as good of blockers, and Rudolph was like an okay blocker, and Herndon in 2020 was a horrible blocker, and I don't think Conklin's really as much of a blocker as Rudolph was. So no, I don't think that would be okay. They're supposed to be better receivers. They have to be. If they're not blocking. They have to produce more. And maybe they still could, but I think we all have our concerns. Eric the Red asks, it is January. The Vikings have suffered yet another heartbreaking postseason loss. You are given a pie. It is blame flavored. You need to distribute this pie between your 5 guests named O-line, receivers, defense, key injuries, and Clint. How do you distribute the pie? I take the pie away from those people and I throw it into the audience where Kirk Cousins is sitting. I mean, come on, you got to put the quarterback on that list, right? And I would imagine that he would have to take some level of the blame. O-line, look, key injuries, I feel like could sink a lot of these units, right? It could be receivers, but it would only be receivers if it was because of injuries, right? If the receiver room was healthy by the postseason, it was Thielen and Jefferson, there's no way I'm putting it on those guys, right? Well, knock on wood, right? But I don't know, probably if all units are healthy, which I think is implied by putting key injuries as one of the things. So the biggest slice of blame probably goes to key injuries. But if all those units are healthy between O-line, receivers, and defense, I don't know if any of them get it. And I don't really know about Clint at all yet. So I don't know. I guess I put a lot of it in key injuries and kind of, I don't know, maybe O-line would be tough if it's like still Rashad Hill or whatever, or if Christian Darrisaw isn't ready to go or whatever. Maybe Garrett Bradbury has a bad season or something. Maybe you could put a little on O-line, but assuming those units are healthy, that seems like the last units I would blame. Mitch asks, why does it hurt to be a Viking fan? Because I will it to be so, personally, because I want you to suffer, Mitch. Kyle asks, why is 58 an ugly D-line number? I don't know, man. It works for Von Miller, but you have to be like an edge rusher. You have to be like a 3-4 outside linebacker type. You know, you can be a defensive tackle. Michael Pierce took 58. This is why we're asking this. Michael Pierce will wear 58 for the season now because he gave Everson Griffin 97. So 58 goes to Michael Pierce, who I guess just doesn't care about his number because 58 looks terrible on a defensive tackle. Bishop Sycamore PR. Oh my God. Asks, who specifically cursed us? I did. It was me. Yeah, sorry. Joseph Bigane asks, now that it looks like Darrisaw might be back sooner rather than later, should the Vikings move O'Neal back to tight end since they don't have any blocking tight ends? Look, my whole existence is hinged on the potential of a Brian O'Neal touchdown, so I'm in for it. And if he doesn't get a touchdown before he flames out of the NFL or retires or whatever, I'll crawl into traffic. I can't handle that. Troy McSee asks, which week do you think Darrisaw will end up replacing Hill? Yeah, there it is. Sometime, I don't know. It'll be whenever Rashad Hill gets benched. And if he gets benched by, say, the game against Myles Garrett, maybe. So week 5, we'll give it. I got a lot more questions here on this mailbag I want to get to. But first, let me talk to you about Grambling. The first game is coming up. A week from Thursday is the NFL season opener between the Bucs and the Dallas Cowboys, and BetOnline has a special deal for you. As of this recording, Bucs are 7.5-point favorites, and the over-under is 51.5. I took that under. That felt a little steep for an over-under with that Bucs defense, so I took that under. But you can take advantage of the BetOnline opening day super promo. If you want to make a bet on that game, if you lose, your wager will be refunded up to $25. So it's a free Gramble on the season openers. You can get all the updated odds, props, and contests. They have online's biggest $500,000 NFL mega contest and the world's largest NFL survival contest at $200,000 open at BetOnline. Head to the website or use your mobile device. You can sign up today and receive 100% welcome bonus. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all of your favorite sports. You can get that welcome bonus and the $25 refund on the season opener for new customers only when signing up and using promo code NFL100. From football, basketball, boxing, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait and take advantage of all the great offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. All right, everybody, moving on with the mailbag. Last part of it here. Anthony Edwards, enthusiast, says, are you Luke Braun, the real punter of the Minnesota Vikings? No, I'm Case Cookus. I'm Case Cookus. Certified Kellen Mond Stan asks, with Mannion going on the practice squad, does this mean they now trust Mond as QB2? Was hoping they'd give him a full redshirt year. Well, at the Mond Pond on Twitter, I have a feeling you have an agenda here. So they have to, right? They have to trust him to some degree because there's 2 different ways a backup comes in, right? Either the way that Mannion is, I guess, preparing for is the COVID problem. So now if you have a COVID outbreak in the room, and Mannion is vaccinated as far as I know, if you have a COVID problem in the room, like what happened in camp, you can elevate Mannion to the active game day roster that day on him at the drop of a hat. So they're kind of protected against that. And then if you need him for more weeks, you can put him on the active roster. You can kind of deal with that after the game. So him being on the practice squad doesn't make him unavailable for that situation. The situation he was unavailable for is an in-game injury. If Kirk Cousins enters the concussion protocol, is the way I always say it, or if he twists an ankle, right? Then Kellen Mond has to come in. So there are pretty reasonable scenarios, as much as Kirk Cousins hasn't been injured, he only has so much control over that. There are certain scenarios where Cousins is unavailable for a drive or two, or has to leave the game or whatever. And then Kellen Mond would have to be the quarterback. He's the only other one under contract on the 53. Slick Deuceman, attorney at law, says record prediction after this totally normal training camp or preseason. 17-0. What are you going to do? Arrest me over it? Taylor asks, do you believe the Vikings to be satisfied with their specialists? Joseph and Colquitt did not have the best of preseasons. Okay, so this is dated. Especially Joseph. There are tons of vet kickers out there that we could bring in for a workout, and he believes the Vikings will do so. So I guess they weren't as good with Colquitt because they got a different guy, so you kind of called it, buddy. But with Joseph, I would not be satisfied with him. He could not make a kick over 50. I mean, this was not, he was below average over 50. He couldn't sink one over 50. It was abysmal. I've never seen a kicker that bad over 50, at least not in person. So, yeah, I don't know. We're definitely worried about that. I don't know. Austin Siebert was a guy. There's a lot of kickers out there. There's Joey Sly is a name that comes up a lot. I'm not a huge fan of his. I don't know. I think they might be satisfied with Greg Joseph. They've done quite a bit to cut and re-sign guys, and they did the punter thing. But I mean, I don't know. The roster might still be in flux, and we still have like 10 days before the Vikings actually play. It's a lot of time for them to go deal with the kicker thing when they had more urgent matters, obviously. So maybe they just didn't deal with it yet because they had more urgent stuff to tend to. And the last one I think I'm going to get to is from Landon Renly, who has... Oh, no, this isn't the last one. There's a couple more. But Landon Renly asks, do other fan bases act like the season is over after we signed a practice squad quarterback too? Or is it just Vikings fans? Are we just the most snakebit franchise there is? We're super snakebit. Yeah, Vikings fans are absolutely insane about this stuff. I always thought Vikings fans were a little too harsh on Mannion. He's a backup quality guy. He's not a starter. He shouldn't start on any team. And therefore, you can kind of, for that reason, say, he's a bad quarterback. And so that's fine. But I do think he's backup. Like, he's rosterable, man. Like, he can be a backup. He can come in, and if Kirk twists his ankle, he can be that quality of guy. And so I kind of wish they put him on the 53. But look, if you need a guy to limp you through a game and just game manage and not lose it, and maybe have a chance, maybe the team across from you is bad that week or whatever, I think Mannion can give you a shot. He can operate the offense, right? And he's not going to be crazy talented. He's not going to create, but he's not going to be terrible. A lot of people pointed to his stat line too against the Bears week 17 a couple of years ago when he had a couple interceptions and stuff. One of those was off a wide receiver's hands. The other one, I don't remember. But yeah, I thought he was fine in that game, man. And he's a backup. Like, he's fine for a backup, which is a not very high bar to clear. But part of clearing that bar is understanding and being able to operate the offense. Kellen Mond doesn't have that yet. He's a rookie, and I don't know if he should have that yet. Justin Fields doesn't have that yet, right? Like, that's okay, but you do have to have your guy in the meantime. Chris asks, who will have the best permutation of the gritty celebration, excluding Jefferson and Thielen? Amir Smith-Marset feels like he's got like the right mentality for that, I think. I don't know. Dalvin looked like he's been working on his, but Dalvin Cook's gritty seems pretty bad. I don't know if I believe in it. Or you got to look at somebody who is like not very, who would have the one that I think brings everybody the most joy. And a lot of this has to do with like the way that this guy would be in the end zone scoring a touchdown, like the way this would manifest itself would already make people really happy. Michael Pierce. Could you imagine a Michael Pierce big boy touchdown and then he gritties? Imagine this, the dopamine. How happy would that make you? And honestly, I think that's a good place to end the show. So that is it. So before I go, I told you there would be an announcement. So here it is. Locked On Vikings is going to be on YouTube. If you want to see this one on YouTube, you can actually find it on Discord, which is linked in the show notes. So you can find that link here. It's a little secret, but Locked On Vikings going on YouTube. So that means an actual video component to this. If you're worried about that changing the show, it won't change the show at all. If you just want to listen to the show on Odyssey or Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever you do, totally will still be up on there as well. But if you want a video component, sometimes there'll be visual aids. I'll be putting up play arts and stuff like that if I'm trying to describe things that are more visual. I'll kind of lean into that. If you are interested in any of that, especially, also guest spots and stuff like that, come check us out on YouTube. Locked On Vikings on YouTube. Just search it up. I hope to see you there. I'll be plugging the crap out of it next week too, so you can't miss it. I will see you all next week, which is the first week actually previewing a game, and then we're all in the swing of in-season, so I can't wait to share all that stuff with you. In the meantime, you can find me on Twitter at LukeBraunNFL, and the show is on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. I will see you all next week, and as always, Skol.